Widespread physical violence, unnecessary pain inflicted, men verbally humiliated even as they tried to take their own lives. The inquiry into Brook House Immigration Removal Centre should have marked a sea change.
It is my sincere hope that more than mere lip service will be paid to this report. The events that occurred at Brook House cannot be repeated.
But the inquiry's chair today tells Channel 4 News that a year after her report, just one of her 33 recommendations has been acted on by the Home Office. It was scenes like these filmed over 5 months by an undercover Panorama journalist in 2017 that led the Conservative government to call for an inquiry in 2019. But key recommendations, including one saying staff should only use force as a last resort, and another that asylum seekers should only be detained for 28 days, haven't been implemented. And Channel 4 News has also seen internal documents from the Home Office arguing they can ignore her findings. The department's lawyers, acting for the then Home Secretary James Cleverly as part of a judicial review case into Brook House, said the inquiry recommendations are not binding and that Kate Eves had no legal qualifications. A source close to James Cleverly said this wording wasn't a value judgment, just a legal argument. This, an inquiry the Home Office set up with no teeth, its recommendations all but gathering dust. On Monday, a Lords report found that public inquiries, which cost the taxpayer tens of millions of pounds, often don't make a difference, with recommendations ignored or delayed. What's more, Chair Kate Eves says she fears things are getting worse. In 2020, private contractor Serco took over running Brook House from G4S. Last month, the regulator found that the use of force had doubled in 2023, that men were being held too long, and that safeguards for the vulnerable were weak.
From December, I stayed for 3 months and a half there.
Ibrahim was detained in Brook House in 2017 and was returned for a few months in late 2023. Do you think it's got worse or better since 2017?
No, worse than before. Before it was not like this. They keep people for years.
And you talked about self-harming. I mean, how common is self-harming in Brook House?
Every single day.
On Monday, a Nigerian care worker who we'll call Samson was awarded £200,000 for inhumane or degrading treatment at Brook House in 2017 that left him with PTSD.
Those lives have been destroyed. Mine was. And I can definitely tell you, mine was probably the least of all. The government tried to argue that it wasn't their fault, it was more of the private company. G4S isn't running Brook House anymore. Another firm is running Brook House. And the situation has doubled. The only thing that has remained the same is that the system hasn't changed.
Kate Eves is pushing for the new Labour government to show more commitment. Sir Keir Starmer rattled some in his party by meeting Italy's right-wing Prime Minister this week and saying he could learn from her immigration policies. The government at pains to be seen as tough on immigration, with plans to reopen 2 detention centres and deport 14,000 people here irregularly in the next 6 months.
Well, the Home Office told us that the abuse that took place at Brook House in 2017 was unacceptable, and the new government is carefully considering the inquiry's recommendations and will set out its approach in due course. Serco, the private contractor who's been running the detention centre since 2020, said they're confident that their team is behaving appropriately as they carry out a demanding and challenging role looking after detained individuals at this difficult time in their lives. Well, I'm joined now by the chair of the Brook House inquiry, Kate Eves. Why do you think your report has effectively been ignored?
It's a great question, isn't it? The then Home Secretary set up the terms of reference for the inquiry, appointed me to that inquiry, accepted the general thrust, I think was the wording, of the recommendations. And yet, when you look at the substance of the response to recommendations, actually only one has been accepted. And in the vast majority of cases, it's not possible to see whether or not they've been accepted or rejected. And I think that makes it very difficult to hold the government to account. I think, as your reporter said, that the Lords Committee have issued an extremely important report this week about inquiries in general and the risk to public confidence in them if inquiries are seen to produce recommendations that are simply disregarded.
And do you have the same confidence that Serco seem to have that their team are behaving appropriately now?
Well, I guess what I would point to is that the recent IMB report, which is an independent report that took place into what's happening at Brook House more recently, they found an increased use of force taking place. And so I don't think that does necessarily give any confidence that the changes that I have stated urgently need to be made have actually been enacted.
So there's a likelihood people are still being mistreated.
I think there's
And they will all have legal cases potentially.
Potentially. I think what I would say is that I am disappointed with what I see as an inadequate response by the former government to an important report that they themselves established an inquiry.
What did it cost, by the way?
Around about £20 million.
£20 million and nothing's changed.
Of public money.
So at the moment it's a total waste.
Well, potentially if nothing comes of that, absolutely. I think as a taxpayer myself, I find that really concerning. I think we should all be worried if public inquiries, which are established to look into facts when something has gone wrong, simply use public resource and then there's no outcome.
I mean, is your suspicion that it was, the politics got in the way? There was a general election, immigration was a big Conservative issue. I suppose being nice to asylum seekers wasn't top priority.
I mean, I wouldn't want to speculate. What I would observe is that the now Home Secretary was, in 2019, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and at the time, when commenting on the situation in Brook House, she called out what she said was a cavalier attitude by the Home Office to immigration detention and called for there to be more attention on a humane approach. So I very much hope that she will now take the opportunity, that now that the new government is in place, to meet with me and revisit these important recommendations.
And what do you make of what was being said about both the inquiry and you inside the Home Office, that the inquiry had no legal standing and you had no legal qualification?
I mean, I think it does a disservice to distract and to avoid talking about the substance, which is the important issues, 19 serious incidents of abuse.
I mean, it sounds like you were in conflict with them. I mean, were you aware that you were in conflict with them?
In conflict with the Home Office?
Yes.
I don't necessarily think there's anything to be gained from engaging in what appears to be a distraction technique to shoot the messenger, so to speak. What I think the government needs to do is focus on the substance of what was found, take note of the fact that His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons and the Independent Monitoring Board have recently produced reports showing that things, if anything, are even more troubling than at the time of the inquiry, and really get a grip of the issues, not focus on my CV.
And do you have any reason to be more confident that this government will enact more of it?
Well, as I say, I think the current Home Secretary's previous position and statements do give me hope that she will meet with me, set out what I hope will be a kind of reset of a really inadequate response by the previous government to actually get a grip of what this government intends to do with the 33 important recommendations. I think it's also important to state there's an upcoming inquiry into Manston Asylum Processing Centre, which I'm sure is going to be front and centre of her mind, and she's going to want to ensure that that is robust and that it's effective. And so I think engaging in a sensible conversation and not going down the route of trying to discredit my my credentials or anything else, but get to the substance of what the evidence showed us and actually deal with this issue.
Casey Hughes, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.